Hello, I'm Thea Margetts and I work for Freshwater Habitats Trust as a project officer in the New Forest. And today I just want to share with you some of the amazing, wonderful wetlands that the New Forest holds. So to start off with, I'm just going to give us a bit of context. So Freshwater Habitats Trust is a national charity with the overarching aim to protect all freshwater life. We are strongly evidence-based and do all of our work with a strong scientific grounding. We have a team dedicated to the New Forest because of how amazing the freshwater habitats and biodiversity is here. We're concerned with all of those freshwaters, from the tiny pools to the big bogs and rivers. And we work strategically, targeting where we can have the biggest impact and in partnership working with communities, conservation organisations and governmental statutory bodies. All this work is that evidence-based work to make sure that we are having a strategic, strong difference. So globally, about 10% of all species are found in fresh waters, of which fresh water only covers around 3% of the land. And there are thought to be as many species in the freshwater as there are in the sea, which occupies 70% of the land. This tells us that freshwater plays a vital role for species diversity and should definitely not be ignored. So our freshwater biodiversity is in crisis. The extinction rates for freshwater species are 4 to 6 times higher than terrestrial or marine ecosystems. And this is highly concerning global decline. Most freshwater in the UK are considered to be in poor condition, so we are no exception to this global trend. With our rivers and lakes highly polluted from nutrients, heavy metals, pathogens, pesticides, and sedimented. The majority of the information we have collected on the condition of our freshwaters as a country has come from the Environment Agency Water Framework Directive monitoring. And this only really covers those rivers and lakes. And the information we have is not good. The most recent data finding only 16% reach a good ecological status, with less than 1% reaching a high ecological status. And then when we look at the chemical statuses, none of our surface water bodies meet the criteria for good. This is in part due to a change in how it is monitored, but nevertheless very worrying. Most of our freshwater habitats, it is impossible to recover from that undamaged status. And the information we have about these small water bodies is missing. So there could actually be opportunities in these small water bodies. We need to raise the profile of small freshwater habitats and work to protect the biodiverse and good chemical habitats that we have and that can be found in small water bodies. So we really need to expand our knowledge and awareness of these small water bodies. If we want to reverse the declines in freshwater biodiversity in the UK, we need to take a different approach to what is currently being done. And as a charity, we really see the value in focusing on some of these small water bodies as a new approach. A new national freshwater network is the ultimate aim, with it comprising of healthy, unpolluted, interconnected freshwater landscapes. And this is achievable, or we think it is at least, by protecting the best, the areas that are highly biodiverse, as this is where species will be able to colonise out from. And we intend to do this through strengthening within that area and then also building out from the existing biodiversity hotspots at both national and local levels. Use small water bodies and wetlands as ecological engineers. So around 80% of freshwater environment is made up in the small waters. So they can have a real significant impact on our freshwater landscapes. And treat freshwaters as a network of habitats. So freshwater species can actually use multiple different water body types to live and feed. So we do not need to view them as isolated to one single water body type. They can travel between ponds and streams, so working to create new water bodies of various types could be creating meaningful opportunities for these species. And then finally, bring back clean water. So clean water is vital for biodiversity and is now very scarce in the UK as a habitat type. Restoring it back to the landscape is a critical step for freshwater protection. So, as the leading charity for freshwater conservation in England and Wales, Freshwater Habitats Trust have identified 24 important freshwater landscapes. These were identified through national species records and act as target areas to build our freshwater network in and away from. And now to bring the New Forest into this. So the New Forest you can see at the bottom, connected actually to the Dorset Heaths when we look at it on this scale. But when considering all of them, the New Forest contains more rare species records per kilometre grid square than any other important freshwater landscape identified, with species that have disappeared from almost every other landscape in the UK. And this is recognised with over 50% of the national park being designated for nature conservation through various designations, many of which at European and international levels. And this is why we are focusing our efforts here, and we have our team working. So some nutshell headline figures for how amazing the New Forest is. So as said, the New Forest has the highest percentage of designated land. This is as sites of special scientific interest than any other national park. Over a third of the UK's freshwater invertebrates can be found here. Over 2/3 of the UK's wetland plants, and 75% of England's critically endangered pond species can all be found within the New Forest. And one of the most important habitats that we have is our wet heaths and valley mire, where the New Forest makes up the largest area of these valley bog type habitats in Europe. And the rarity of them would actually put them as the most significant habitat that we have in the national park, with nearly 2,900 hectares of them. So it's great to look at figures, but actually we want to see what some of them really look like. And here is a small selection of some of those hundreds of species that the New Forest contains. One I always like to highlight is the tadpole shrimp. So the tadpole shrimp can only be found in the New Forest and in Solway Firth. It is a super ancient crustacea that specialises to clean ephemeral, heavily grazed water bodies. So ephemeral water bodies being ponds that are temporary and dry up and then refill with water each year. Their life cycle from hatching an egg to laying an egg can happen all whilst that pond is holding water in as little as 2 weeks. And then those eggs will remain in the top layer of the soil when the pond is dry and can survive for decades whilst waiting for the pond to refill with rainwater. The fairy shrimp is similar to the tadpole shrimp, but slightly less rare. And they equally have a life cycle adapted to these temporary ponds, living their lives suspended in water, swimming on their backs, using their legs to shuffle and direct food towards their mouths. The pond mud snail at the bottom is a heavily declining species, and again requires a dry and wet season in its life cycle. Pennyroyal, a plant above that, is a beautiful plant that attracts pollinators during the summer, and it has a minty smell when the leaves are crushed. Few animals eat pennyroyal due to the toxins in the plant, and this makes it really well adapted to heavily grazed, nutrient-poor habitats like the New Forest lawns. And then here are some more of those beautiful species. So we've got marsh club moss, which the New Forest is a hotspot for. but the rest of England has seen huge declines and extinctions across many sites. And it is a truly ancient plant, although called a moss, not actually a moss, but a non-flowering perennial. And it needs the grazed landscape to have its place, controlling the other vegetation around it. Medicinal leech below it. It's the largest leech found in the UK, with yellow and red stripes along their upper side, and they can grow up to about 20 centimetres. They favour habitats of small, shallow ponds that quite often dry up or dry down during the summer, as the shallow waters ensure a higher temperature, and they need around 25 degrees in the water for breeding. The medicinal leech that once thought to be extinct, but actually have some established populations here in the New Forest. They only exist in grazed ponds, but this grazing has to be at the right level, as although the grazing provides both food and controls vegetation growth, too intense and the long stands of marginal leaved vegetation, which they need to make their cocoons and lay their eggs, would be lost. So it needs to be kept to the right level. And then next to them we have newts. So this is a great crested newt, but the New Forest holds all 3 species of native newt. And the great crested newts only use ponds during their breeding season. But obviously that is quite a vital part of having the survival of a species. The rest of the year they will be feeding on invertebrates in hedgerows, woodlands and tussocky grassland. They're quite dinosaur-like in appearance, with warty skin, and in breeding times the males have this beautiful crest. Their courtship consists of standing on their front legs and arching their backs, waving their tail, in quite a fantastic display. We also have pillwort above that. So pillwort is the only native aquatic fern, and it has the tight coils that you see ferns have, and that's its really identifying feature. It's a priority species in rapid decline, but the New Forest, it thrives. It's a good competitor. It's not a good competitor and requires both grazing pressures and clean water. And then lastly, I wanted to include curlew on this slide, as although they are not thought to be a wetland species, they actually interact with our wetlands quite a lot. And also they link up a lot of varieties of habitats, needing large tracts of a connected landscape to really have a surviving and thriving population. They will feed on the mudflats and the coastal areas of the estuaries, and then nest in the heathlands and mires. And mires are actually thought to be a really important nesting habitat for them, as they're more protected from predators. So it ensures some fledging. So all of these different species are in part there because of all of our different water body types and habitats that are represented in the New Forest. There is a complexity of wetland habitats, with streams flowing through heathlands, woodlands, and every other type of terrestrial habitat, as well as having ponds of different sizes and on different geologies, and also having different stories behind each one, whether formed through a marl pit or a gravel pit. And all of these different things, with the length of time that they hold water also changing and increasing the diversity of water bodies that can be found. Here are a few of those examples of water bodies in a variety of pictures and words. However, it is really quite difficult to define all of the different wet spaces that exist in the New Forest, many pushing what people's typical idea of what a pond or a habitat is at all. We like to gather them all under one heading, and that is wetlands. So wetlands are defined as areas where water covers the soil or is present either at or near the surface of the soil all year for varying periods of the year. These can generally be classified as coastal or tidal and inland or non-tidal. It's important to think about the New Forest as a whole, with water bodies not isolated. All of them can be closely connected to the sea, with our streams in the New Forest running very quickly from the headwaters and the source down to the coast. And now I just want to talk about a couple of wetlands that are featured on this slide. So I've already mentioned how important mires are, but just to give you a bit of a definition to what they actually are, is a mire is defined as being a permanently acidic wet area that forms peat as the organic matter is being decomposed without oxygen. And as I said, they are of national scarcity and therefore a really important habitat. Ponds, so we have various different types and sizes and styles of pond in the New Forest. So we have those temporary or ephemeral ponds. In the New Forest, there are over 1,000 recorded ponds. And Freshwater Habitats Trust's flagship ponds project identified 200 ponds in the UK of exceptional quality. And over 40 of these sites were located in the New Forest. So not only do we have a large number of ponds, but we have a large number of exceptional quality ponds. And it's thought that we have the top 5 ponds in the UK. A pond is defined as something between 1 metre squared and 2 hectares, which holds water for more than 4 months of the year. But these don't even need to be continuous. So really, our idea of a pond can be expanded massively to include some of our trackway ditches and pools that actually, although tiny habitats, contain some of the rarest plants. And as a visitor, you probably don't even know what plants and rarities you're walking past in some of these small pools off the side of footpaths. And then we can't forget some of the running water networks. So headwater streams can be like our ponds and dry up seasonally. And there are some special associated plants and invertebrates equally with this mechanic of the drying up. So the purple mayfly and rare beetle populations amongst some of the special creatures linked to these seasonal streams. So why is it that the New Forest has such biodiversity? Well, all of those different types of wetlands are definitely part of it, but there's more to it than that. So unlike anywhere else in lowland England, the New Forest still has clean water habitats, and species have adapted over millions of years to low nutrient environments. And low nutrients are linked to high biodiversity as plants compete for nutrients and develop to specific niches. Many species also are completely reliant on that traditional grazing, with the depressions left by free-roaming livestock, spaces and opportunities for them. Grazing provides natural disturbance to habitats, preventing any single species from dominating. And equally, the super organic poo that they leave behind cycles nutrients, changing these niches and giving them just the right amount of nutrient that they need to thrive. In a perfect combination, these conditions lead to thriving biodiversity and a landscape bursting with rare species. This picture illustrates my point perfectly, with pillwort, that aquatic fern seen in the foreground, and then also marsh St John's wort, marsh pennywort, lesser spearwort, all growing in these depressions left by the cattle behind. So I've said we have amazing clean water, but what do I actually mean when I say that? And how do we know, as the Environment Agency monitoring clearly does not monitor every water body? Well, clean water is defined as water with the chemistry or biology that would be normal given an area in the absence of human disturbance. We focus on nutrients, as in the absence of people, most freshwater habitats would naturally have low nutrient concentrations. And since freshwater plants and animals have evolved over millions of years to these conditions, the majority of species require these naturally low nutrient environments to flourish. So how do we know this is what we have in the New Forest. We've conducted some citizen science surveys to test the full range of water bodies for nutrients in the landscape. And we've conducted 2 over our time here. The first in 2016 as part of a national clean water for wildlife study. And then the second from the winter of 2022 to the spring of 2023 as part of our local Wonderful Water project. And the data that we got as the result of this really backs up our claim that the New Forest has irreplaceable, clean, low nutrient waters. The 2016 study puts the New Forest into a national context, as we can compare it against another lowland England catchment. In this, we've used the Och catchment. And here, by looking at the pie charts, you can see the drastic difference between them. The Och catchment having 74% of sites showing pollution, and then the New Forest having 72% of sites showing no evidence of pollution. And then in this latest study, we looked to see if that landscape was changing and to fill in some of the data sparse areas. So our latest data showed of the 828 sites that we tested, 81% of them were clean, which really shows that we still have clean water in this landscape. Nothing drastic has happened and changed the whole landscape. To better understand this, we divided the New Forest by the green area that you can see on the map. This is the core area designated for nature conservation as a special area of conservation. And it hosted 73% of all the clean water samples, while outside of that area hosted 70% of the polluted water samples. So this really highlights the impact of land use on water quality and the isolation to designated areas that many species could be facing. Ponds were found to be the most consistent clean water body type across both studies, and these findings are consistent with other research undertaken by Freshwater Habitats Trust, supporting our mission to care about all freshwaters and try and raise awareness of the profile of ponds and small water bodies. And although it might look like a really promising story, there is some worry, as when we purely look at those sites that were retested from the 2016 study, there was actually a net 6% deterioration in water quality, especially concerning as the majority of the negative change happened within the area designated for nature conservation. So what can we do about it locally? In the New Forest, we are an established catchment partnership. So back in 2012, DEFRA set out to tackle catchment management using a bottom-up approach, where the people working and living in that landscape would work to address the issues. alongside the Environment Agency and their priorities. So we formed a joint partnership with the New Forest National Park Authority to look at what was really important in this area and what we could do to make a difference. Our vision is to protect and restore the freshwater and coastal habitats to a very high standard, going above and beyond that Water Framework Directive good, and to include all water bodies, including ponds and small lakes and headwater streams and mires. So just again to highlight sort of why we think ponds are so important and why we really think that they should be focused on in landscape management. The New Forest ponds have 690 species associated with them, of which 25% are species of conservation concern. And then when we compare that to the New Forest streams, there's around 220 species associated with them, of which 13% are species of conservation concern. So both are fantastically biodiverse and contain rare species. However, the New Forest ponds are capable of supporting 470 more species than those streams, with more rarities. So we really do need to focus and not forget or discard them out of hand. So this is the area of which the New Forest Catchment Partnership sort of operates and has influence over, working with lots of different partnerships. This is the Environment Agency monitoring boundaries. So this is the New Forest catchment, and it is 300 square kilometres in the southern area of the national park. The north area being the lower Test catchment, and then the west of that being the Avon, Hampshire catchment. And there are 12 notable rivers and lakes which are monitored under the Environment Agency, but we know that there are so many more water bodies than that. And yeah, so this is the area of which the Catchment Partnership work, but we also work outside and beyond this, as we understand that water and species do not abide by boundaries. And what we do outside will protect what we do around. So this landscape is facing many pressures. These can be causing or influencing the clean water pollution, from poorly maintained septic tanks and small wastewater treatment works to recreational management and runoff from farmyards. All of these things have the ability to influence that clean water. And the changes we observed in the water blitz are likely to be a result of a mix of changing factors. The pollution at any single site likely to be caused from a combination of sources. And there's also other pressures, such as isolation, where species genetics could be degrading. And there's also invasive species that can take over habitats. And disturbance is also part of that recreational pressure. So we work as the Catchment Partnership, and we do that with other partners. What we are doing under it broadly comes under two categories: raising awareness and practical delivery. We have a project to address each of these two. So Wonderful Water is a project targeting visitors and locals, raising awareness and engaging about our water environment. And then the Blue Horizons project focuses a bit more with landowners and practical deliveries, such as putting in new ponds and nutrient management systems. And I'm now going to go into a bit more detail about the work we're doing under these two projects. So to start off with, Blue Horizons, that is a project which targets landowners and businesses to strategically work to create habitats or find suitable water management practices, raising awareness of the value of freshwater and coastal habitats. Changes to land management can increase the natural capital value and the ecosystem services of a land holding and offer benefits to the wider landscape in protecting and serving those water bodies. This project works both within land designated for nature conservation and around the edges as it seeks to address improvement in both the running and standing water network. 2/3 of the UK's ponds have been lost since the 19th century. And as well as providing an important refuge for freshwater species of conservation concern, evidence also shows that good ponds are vital habitats for declining terrestrial species. So we've been addressing some of this pond loss by creating some new ones. The New Forest, there is a really opportunity to create these high quality ponds around the edges and within, give the catchment a real boost in biodiversity. And they're cost effective in comparison with other interventions. Creation can halt and reverse the decline as it gives species a new space to go. When we create a pond, we have to receive planning permission before work to be done. And we also think about the sort of ponds that will be created, working with the landowner's vision and what we really want to see, using evidence and research to create a pond that is characteristic of the landscape. On this slide, you can see 2 ponds that we've helped create. The bottom picture is a woodland on the edge of the special area of conservation, and it's nicely developing a community of wet heath, as well as a thriving pond community. And then the side pictures show one pond being dug, which was one of 3 on a site at the edge of the New Forest again. And we'll talk a bit more about that pond now. So this is that pond after 9 months. So the site is a small farm in the south of the forest with a landowner who was really keen and already doing lots for wildlife. The land surrounded by designated land. And the site it was on was a site already indicated to have some rare and valuable species. So purple moorgrass and rush pasture meadow were sort of the habitats around it. In 9 months after creating a pond, and well, 3 ponds, around 20 wetland plant species were seen, including water dock, greater bird's foot trefoil, knotweed, buttercups, common fleabane, marsh foxtail, sedges, floating sweetgrass, joint rush, water crowfoot and crudweed. There was also common darters laying eggs in these water bodies and lots of damselflies present flying around. Bloodworms and various other species of water beetle and water boatmen and water shrimps, all also already visible in the pond. It shows just how quickly nature will take advantage when there's an opportunity created for it. What some of the restoration has been completed through this project as well in woodland management. So woodlands are not all trees. There's a lot more to them than that. And we've focused on these woodlands that have lots of ponds, pools, root plate pools, spring lines and flushes. And it really is a mosaic of priority habitats with some selective felling to open up the canopy or large areas of rhododendron being removed to uncover some of these wetland features. We really see a difference and improvement and benefit to the all-round biodiversity. So there are lots of small pockets of woodlands around the New Forest, and there's real opportunities to enhance them. However, they often don't qualify for grants, so are left as remnant ancient semi-natural woodlands with lots of opportunities, but lacking some real management. And the fragmentation and this lack of management means that specialist species are less likely to be present. But we have done some work, so we're getting some really positive stories. This is one of the small wetland clearings that we've created, where the ground flora already had some promise with rush pasture and some species like common marsh thistle and common fleabane. So we looked into doing some work and funding this to extend sensitively this small area of clearing. So we cleared some small young sycamores and willows that had recently started developing, as well as focusing a little bit with volunteer tasks on some of the rhododendron in this woodland, starting to reduce its cover. And only a year later, only 7 months later, so this was again my colleague visiting the site in September 2023. And she really saw a positive response with the increased light going into the area with species such as marsh thistle, common fleabane, hemp, agrome, sedges, marsh bedstraw, gypsywort, greater birdsfoot trefoil, all colonising these newly created areas. And also seeing a lot of invertebrates buzzing around, including small copper butterfly. And while she was there, she also spotted some flycatchers. Well, she spotted several spotted flycatchers feeding from the clearing in some deadwood trees. And the last thing we really do through this project is that nutrient management and land and advice for farmers to adapt their practices to limit the nutrient inputs going into the water bodies. So this is done using various methods. One of the most commonly used methods we've sort of advised and helped with is rainwater harvesting. So this method manages the nutrient pollution by separating the clean and the dirty water. By collecting that water off the roof, you create less runoff off the farmyards that potentially increases the nutrients going into the water bodies, and also develop a really good resource for the farmer. Or we've also done similar work with nurseries, and they've now been able to go off main supply for the majority of the year, only focusing on the rainwater that they have in the harvesting tanks. Similarly, there's other methods that use this idea of separating the clean and the dirty water, managing the amount of runoff that goes into the other water bodies. So installing dirty water tanks, concrete pads and roof diverting guttering to the water so that the water flows not through the yard. And also relocating historic manure heaps. So covering a manure heap or relocating it away from water bodies really impacts the amount of nutrients that are flowing directly into our natural water bodies. And all of this is in line with regulation, but we're also aiming for that gold standard due to the high status of the New Forest. Then now I want to talk about our other project we have running, Wonderful Water, that aims to address the recreational issues and manage the threat to Water Framework Directive water bodies, as well as the special area conservation priority freshwater habitats and species. And we do this through engaging with a range of people, and we use our New Forest Water Code as a real platform and some positive messages that people can take away with them. So since the project started in 2021, we've engaged with over 11,000 people at various different events, practical tasks, on some guided walks and talks like this. And we cannot protect the New Forest without working to educate those who live and visit here, really making people understand the value where they are and what they're walking through. Now, it's difficult to know the impact that our conversations would be having, but we hope that each one opens people's eyes to the wonderful wetland wildlife that the New Forest holds and gives them a takeaway action. Our real aim is to change people's perspectives on what valuable wetland habitats are. This is a beautiful, valuable wetland habitat. And as you can see, it really doesn't look like a wetland with the water below the soil or seasonal. And you can see some coral necklace, so some yellow century here. And we really want to change people's perspectives to value these. Again, some small water bodies that are so valuable and wonderful in the New Forest. Lastly, this picture is of what my manager says is the second best pond in England. And would you see the best pond in England when you looked at that? Or would you not appreciate the whole biodiversity that it holds? So really change the way you look at the landscape and value the areas that look like these. So I mentioned our water code, which is a set of positive actions individuals can take to limit their impact on the freshwater habitats and species. And I'm just going to quickly run through our 6 water code messages. The first 3 on this slide, focusing on clean water for wildlife. Leave no trace is about not leaving any waste behind, whether an apple core, a dog poo, or the last bit of coffee. And the visible rubbish puts the lives of the important grazing livestock at risk, and the non-visible waste from wild weeds or wastewater runoff puts the biodiversity at risk as it adds nutrient pollution. Use suitable facilities. There are public toilets, wastewater disposal points, and car parks, all allowing people visiting to minimise their impact, and we want people to use them. When camping, many do not know that it is still important to dispose of unused water at the wastewater points, as tap water is chemically very different to rainwater. And lastly, stick to the pitch, which recognises that the New Forest is a sensitive, protected landscape and does not have the suitable facilities for camping outside of campsites. And this includes that day camping in car parks. Planning a visit can really help protect the clean water. So this is a display that I use at a lot of the events I do to really help people understand the difference in water chemistry between our rainwater that fills up our natural water bodies and our tap water that is processed and abstracted from our large rivers, where it has a lot of agricultural nutrient and wastewater treatment inputs into it, meaning it is very high nutrient. And it really gets people to think about our waste and the waste that we can't always see. So our other 3 water code messages try and focus a bit more on disturbance. So on the right track, there are paths through this landscape, and staying on the right one, whether dog, human, horse rider or cyclist, limits disturbance to wildlife. Consistently jumping or running through water bodies has a significant negative impact. Right activity, right place. Not all activities are allowed everywhere, and there are reasons behind that. This message is about following those rules, signs and guidance, going to designated places for activities like swimming or paddleboarding. And lastly, check, clean, dry. Equipment and boots can carry more than you think. Invasive species, pests and diseases can all live on them. Invasive species disrupt the native wildlife, and the water environment is particularly at risk as it flows through the landscape and can spread these species quickly once introduced. The impacts of all of these sort of little things really do build up and make a big difference on our water environments. So this is actually a pond in Kent, but it really highlights the impact of disturbance with a fence separating access. So the side, which is very green, lush, full of different wetland plants, there is no recreational access. Whereas the sort of other side that is very devoid of vegetation within that water is open to recreational access. And it just really, when the New Forest is one of the most visited national parks with over 15 million visitor days per year, it is worth thinking about, oh, my impact adds up with everybody else's and can drastically change the landscape and a water body. And then this is a pond in the New Forest, and it is covered by an invasive species called Crassula hemsula. There's no way to remove this, and now it has taken and established in the pond. And it really needs to get us thinking about our biosecurity. It was introduced as a plant to the UK in 1911, used in garden ponds, but forms this dense mat around the shallow water and completely smothers out native plants. So when we are going for walks in different areas or when we go on holiday and come back, it's really important to think about removing any mud on site and then giving our boots and equipment a deep clean when back at home. And not forget to check your dog. So dogs have also been travelling through those various environments. So your takeaway, what I want you to remember from this talk, is that our rare abundance of species are based on having clean, unpolluted waters and that intricate mix of grazing. And if we want to protect this landscape, we need to protect those mechanisms and features. So following our water code and preventing excess disturbance really ensures that we are going to have some of these rare species going into the future. So I hope you will all go now and follow the water code every time you visit. Blue Horizons and Wonderful Water are ongoing projects, and if you want to find out more about them, or the Catchment Partnership, or Freshwater Habitats Trust's policies and research, visit our website. We also have advice if you're looking to do and create your own pond in your garden on our website as well. And you can stay up to date with our activities through our social media, where we have both a national charity account and then a local New Forest account. And if you want to be part of any future citizen science projects we have running, or learn a bit more in depth about the Catchment Partnership activities, some of the activities of our partners, then sign up to our water news. We only send out emails roughly once a month, so your inbox won't be overwhelmed. Right, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to end the recording now.